Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Solfate Podcast, where we chat with founders and builders in mostly the Solana ecosystem, but also blockchain more broadly. And today we have one of those founders who's in the Solana ecosystem, but also has done some stuff, cross-chain. We talked with John Ennis.
Lots of stuff in Bitcoin.
Yep. We talked with John Ennis from NeoSwap. He's the CEO and founder of NeoSwap. NeoSwap is basically an AI-driven swap facilitator, right? So like the idea is that we can facilitate swaps across broad groups of people, not just sort of one-to-one, in a way that is more efficient, where it's not just swapping coins, it's swapping any types of assets, right? So sort of using AI to determine how much you value your assets versus someone else values theirs, and facilitate these large-scale swaps that are far more efficient. And wow, was it a fascinating discussion.
Yeah, it was super interesting. Like this whole idea of effectively creating an ultra efficient market of swap of value, not necessarily like NFTs or fiat currency, but theoretically you could do anything, any exchange of value in an ultra efficient manner by doing this interesting, like James said, AI driven matchmaking. And it was a really interesting conversation. Like John is clearly an incredibly smart person. He's got a PhD in, I'm going to get this wrong. It was some specific type of geometry.
It was.
Do you remember what it was?
I don't remember exactly.
I can't remember exactly.
Some kind of geometry.
Sorry, John.
Basically, he's
super smart guy.
He's a math whiz, and it was an awesome convo.
It was really cool.
Definitely check it out. He talks about sort of the drawbacks of different types of auction systems and how you can improve on that. A few of sort of their core products that improve on that. One of them is a smart auction, that sort of thing. Super fun. I'm very curious to sort of follow along.
Yeah, I need to go learn more about NeoSwap
and like see how things play out for them. That being said, before we shift into that, just a quick thank you to our sponsors. Phantom is sort of the preferred wallet for the Solfate ecosystem. So definitely check out Phantom. You probably already know them. You probably already use them. They are fantastic.
You can check out your Solfate Podcast NFTs directly in Phantom.
Boom. And we got actually some cool stuff that we're cooking up with.
We're cooking
Phantom
some real
here.
cool stuff. I'm so excited.
It's going to be fun. And then Nick, if you'll let me, I'm just going to
dev list,
dude. Yeah. Get on that dev list. That's true. We should plug the dev list. We've not talked about the dev list on the show, I don't think. So
I don't think we have.
Go follow Solfate HQ on Twitter, and you'll see what we've sort of been talking about with the dev list. But basically, the dev list exists to reward developers in the ecosystem. If you are a developer and you're not on the dev list, you should be. Do not miss a bonk like airdrop yet again. That's basically what that is. So go to solfate.com and check out the dev list. Apply if you haven't already. If you've applied and been accepted and haven't minted your token yet, go mint your token.
Do so,
because you're not on the dev list until you mint the token.
That's
right?
true.
I'm also going to put a plug for my dev shop. Why not? Unboxed.
Sure,
I run a dev shop called Unboxed. We do all sorts of stuff for different people. We're fairly generalist, but obviously we do a lot in the Solana ecosystem. So shoot me a DM on Twitter if you need work done in any capacity, and we'll see if we can help out. But other than that, let's jump into the show.
Yeah, let's get to it. Nothing in this podcast is or should be considered financial advice. Any opinions and thoughts expressed are solely those of the individual. They do not represent the opinions of any entity. Enjoy. I would love,
our chats are not super structured. We love to just sort of have a conversation and let it take us where we will. That being said, it's always nice to have maybe a little bit of structure to start. I would love to get maybe the elevator pitch for, NeoSwap, and then maybe back up from there to get a little bit of history. So just so sort of listeners know like what it is we're going to be talking about and gearing towards, let's maybe start with that, and then we can work backwards.
Yeah, well, the basic idea of NeoSwap is to make your assets spendable, to give you purchasing power from your assets. Now, it might sound like barter, but it's not. You still need money. Barter has all sorts of scaling problems. It's kind of a blend of barter and currency-based commerce. And it's an idea I've been working on for a long time, even going back to my childhood. When I was a child, my dad is a famous scientist, and he's a mathematical psychologist. So he was always running experiments on us when we were kids. Like, for example, we'd go out to dinner and he would order all the desserts, and myself and my 3 brothers and sisters would have to eat all the desserts and rate them. And he would do an analysis and make a little map and show us where we were relative to the desserts and explain our interest, that kind of thing. So what he used to do at Christmas is he'd give out the Christmas presents at random, starting when I was about 12. It's actually like an NFT mint. It's kind of funny. And then we'd have to trade them with each other. And there was one Christmas, and actually the NeoSwap logo, which is here in the background, this is kind of an homage to that Christmas where I had a doll that my sister wanted, and she had a game that my brother wanted. He had some Legos that I wanted. There were no pairwise trades available, but there was a 3-way trade. And so that kind of got me interested in, okay, what about multi-way trading? If you've got a bunch of people who have stuff, maybe individually it's hard to work out trades, but if you have like a bird's eye view on the situation, you can figure out, if you know how much everybody wants everything, you can figure out trades that are good for everybody. Now that's just barter when you have items, and it's very hard to, barter just doesn't scale. But once you get currency involved, then you can get into complex transactions where you're effectively paying with your things. You want something, you have stuff other people want. If we can look down on this whole network of people and figure out how much does everybody value everything that's kind of in the ecosystem, can we start to propose trades where maybe, I send something to both of you guys, and maybe Nick, you send something to James, and some money comes back the other way. So you have money and assets flowing around, and you have this new type of commerce. So in 2017, just a little bit about me and my background. So I did my PhD in math. I have a PhD in differential geometry, and I've always been into geometry. But towards the end of that degree, I realized that I wanted to do something more applied. I didn't want to be a professor. I actually had went to a seminar with one of my mathematical idols. He was speaking, and he was just so out of touch with the world. When I met him in person, I thought it was really disillusioning. I thought I don't want to be him, And so I thought, all right, I want to get out into the world and do stuff. And so I talked to my father about it, and he had a friend who just started a few years previously, the computational neuroscience group at UC Santa Barbara, where I was doing my PhD. So I went over to the psychology department, and I did my postdoc in computational neuroscience, which overlaps. Back then it was computational neuroscience. A lot of that would be called AI now. In those days, I was writing Fortran code to code neural networks. These were kind of neurobiologically motivated neural networks that were meant to explain human category learning. That were trying to, in those days, we wanted to understand people better. And so we were building neural networks to simulate what people do. And now very often it goes the other way, where people are looking for new ideas. Now, it's not entirely true. The neural networks, like transformers and whatnot, they're sort of loosely inspired by the brain, but it's, the analogy breaks down pretty quickly. But we were writing computer programs to simulate human behavior, to test hypotheses, and then we would go to the lab and we'd find that, sometimes the computer program would exhibit very strange behavior. And then you'd find out that humans have the same strange behavior, and you wouldn't have expected it. So it was actually really informative to do that. So that got me interested in AI. And then I did after I finished my postdoc, I was a market research consultant. So I did that for about a decade. And that's when I got really aware of individual differences. And that's kind of a key idea in NeoSwap when you think about it. If everybody values these items the same, then there's no trades. What makes commerce happen is that different people value things differently, right? And if you have something that you don't value very much, but somebody else does value it, then now you have the opportunity for commerce. So that's kind of the whole idea of commerce, right? When you have specialization between nations trading, this kind of thing. You think about what's the utility that somebody would assign to an item, what's the utility other people would assign to it, and then can we rearrange ownership so that everyone benefits from the trade? So in 2017, I was still kind of working on this problem of multi-way trading, and I wrote the first version of the NeoSwap algorithm. And I tried to use it with Facebook Marketplace. My wife and our neighbor, they were doing a lot of stuff in free cycle groups. There's a lot of communities. You probably see this. People put stuff outside. People come get it. And I thought there's probably a better way to do this because, I might be giving away a bunch of stuff, right? And if it's the case that a bunch of people want those things, and I just start giving things out to the first person who shows up, I may not actually be the best way to give things out to the community. It might be that one person only wants one item, other person will take any of them. Better to give the person only wants the one item, the one thing. You end up with these kind of log jams that happen in our world. So I tried to solve that problem, and it was just impossibly hard. You just don't have, when you're trying to build in somebody else's ecosystem with a new idea, it's very hard, right? You just don't have enough control. And you also don't have enough information. That, for example, if I'm trying to sell something on Facebook Marketplace, you can write a bot to scrape data and monitor things. But if I was trying to sell a surfboard, And maybe you analyze my whole profile. You figure out I want these other things that are for sale. You're trying to do that matchmaking. By the time you finally find a trade that involves that surfboard, maybe I sold it, because people don't typically post on Facebook Marketplace when they sell things, right? So I kind of shelved the idea. But then in 2019 or so, I realized that blockchain actually gives us all the things we need to do what I want it to do, because you can look at the blockchain. It depends on the chain, but on a lot of chains, you can see who owns things at any point in time. And in some sense, a blockchain is really just this record of ownership. That's what it is. It's a decentralized record of ownership. And it's, one of the things that people own, is one of this kind of sets of things are currencies. People own currencies, but they also own assets. That's what NFTs are, right? Are like certificates of ownership for these digital assets, or they can correspond to real world items. And I thought, all right, this is great. We can do this. So I left out something here. In 2019, I started my first company, Agora, which is an enterprise AI services business. So I was working as a market research consultant. I saw that there was a big need for AI within, CPG companies, this kind of thing. We were working with, the big companies, like all the Fortune 500, like, Nestle, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, those types of companies. So every one of those companies has a group of people that are interested in market research. And they're interested in what's the consumer experience of the products they make. That's one of the things that goes into market research. Realized there was a big need for AI in that world. So I started a company called Agora, which is a healthy company. It still is in existence. It's got, I think, 12 employees. I started that company in 2019. And a few years into it, we were doing really well. And I thought, okay, I can finally come back to this idea that I've had for a long time. Kind of a little bit like Elon with X, although Elon is like 100 times the entrepreneur I am. You guys have probably read his autobiography. That guy's a beast. He's like,
Absolutely.
He's just a beast.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. But same sort of idea, though. He never really gave up on the idea of X.com, the everything app. And now we're finally getting it. And it's the same thing with me, where I never really gave up on this idea. I was always in the back of my head. So we were doing well enough at Agora that we could devote, myself and the head of AI and the director of technology there, were able to spend a year, half time, just working on a side project on this project, which we called Tradimple in the early days. Trading Made Simple. That was the name we had for it.
Oh, I love that
terrible name. Tradimple kind of
a little mix of words.
Yeah, but that's what we called it. And we were, we were doing it first just with images, and then we went on chain. And Stacks was the first blockchain. They used to be called Block Stacks. Maybe you guys know Stacks now. It's actually gone up in value quite a lot. They had just done their mainnet launch right around the time that we were ready to test, with on chain, to bring our ideas on chain. And I wanted a small group of people that would actually use our app. I thought, okay, obviously the thing to do would have been to launch on Ethereum back then, but it was just I was afraid we'd get lost in the noise, that they wouldn't be able to get anybody to try the app. And I've always liked Bitcoin. I'm sort of a recovering Bitcoin maxi, where I like the idea of building on Bitcoin Stacks. That was sort of the promise. I think it'll finally come true with the new upgrade that they're doing. I like the idea of building on Bitcoin. It was a small community, a lot of smart people there. And so we started showing it around the Stacks community, which was really only a few hundred people. So we were very quickly able to get people to test the app because there wasn't a lot happening on the chain. So people tried it. We were doing these events where you get a group of people together over half an hour, and people could put the NFTs they wanted to sell into a room. They could bid on each other's NFTs. They could set a limit on how much they wanted to spend. And then we'd figure out trades that were good for everybody. And we would do trades, 20, 30 people, this kind of thing. So that was interesting. And we got invited to join the Stacks Accelerator. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Honestly, those parties are fun. The trouble is there's a lot of friction. And that's where, the whole point of a pre-seed startup is to figure out, through the series of experiments, how do you match your technology to the market? And that's what we've been doing. So we joined the Stacks Accelerator, and we raised money pretty easily in April, May of 2022, I think it was now. That was the tail end of the last bull market. We raised $500,000. And then it was just a total battle after that, because once Lunaterra blew up, it was just Lunaterra blew up the day that we increased our valuation, and that day Lunaterra blew up. And then we were battling. Then I think it was 3 hours, and then it was Celsius. We launched on Solana, and the next week FTX went bankrupt. It was just like that the whole time.
That's just some bad luck.
yeah, it was just what it was. But it made us very strong, honestly. I think there's a lot of companies out there that raised easily at very high valuations that are now either out of business or going out of business because, it's easy to spend money. If you raise a lot of money, it's easy to spend it. And if you spent a lot of money and then the bear market hit, you could really have been left pretty vulnerable. So I honestly think in retrospect, it was hard, but it made us stronger. And we've done tons of experiments. We have kind of 3 use cases that we've honed in on, that we are focused on. And we can talk about that, over the rest of the show. How are we going to bring this vision? It's really a new payment method. How is it that you, when you want to buy something, can get purchasing power from the stuff that you own? That's kind of what we're going for. And the result is you no longer have to go through. Right now, if you want to buy something, you need to get money somewhere. You either have it, or you need to take out a loan, or you need to sell stuff. But that's all really inefficient. And so the whole vision of NeoSwap is to at first get people to describe what it is they're trying to do and eventually start to predict it. And to have this kind of orchestration layer that's running on top of the economy, that's constantly working out where do the assets need to go, where does the money need to go so that people achieve their goals. That's the kind of big vision of NeoSwap.
First of all, this is fascinating. I have an economics degree myself, and while I didn't do much with that after I graduated, I am fascinated by making the economy more efficient, right? Facilitating transactions in a way that induces less deadweight loss, right? Less friction. So this is super cool. I would love to know what's the current state, right? So you sort of mentioned this state when you did the initial sort of MVP round with Stacks, if you will, where it's get everybody in a room and we'll all sort of put up these things that we're interested in potentially getting rid of, and we'll see how efficiently we can make swaps and trades. What does that look like today?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, we have kind of 3 use cases, and you can simplify that problem if instead of having, in the most pure form, everybody's a buyer and a seller. Okay. So one simplification is one seller, lots of buyers, and a lot of items. Okay. This is like a collection auction. So think about, you got 20 items that you want to auction off, or it could be a large number. It could be 100 items you want to auction off. And currently, if you have a group of items that you want to auction off, like an artist has a collection they want to auction off, or we've done whiskey auctions, a collection of whiskeys, or we've done Magic the Gathering auctions, a collection of cards, this kind of thing. You want to auction them to a group. Right now, you have to either do them one at a time, and people will hold back. The bids will be lower on the early items because people are saving their money for the items that are coming later. It's not unusual for people to be interested in, the first item, not bid very high on it because they're waiting for the second item. Then they get outbid on the second item. They go home with nothing. And they would have actually put in a winning bid on the first item, but it's too late, right? Or you do them all at the same time. And this is very common in the fundraising world, where not startup fundraising, but nonprofit fundraising, where you do these silent auctions where you probably been to these events where you go in and there's 20 pieces for sale and you can bid on each of them. In that world, what happens is people will pick a few items and they'll just focus on a few items and they'll bid on those items. And the reason they do that is they're afraid that they're going to win everything, right? That if you win everything you bid on, you have to pay for it. And so, again, it's inefficient. People don't bid on everything. So in our world, what happens is you come to an auction, you set a limit on how much you want to spend, you set a limit on how many items you want to win. Now you've got protection. No matter what happens, you won't spend more than your budget, okay? Then you can bid on everything. You can actually bid on every single item. And everybody can bid on every item. So now people can bid on every item. It's really about expressing your, it again gets back to intentions. What are your intentions? So people can bid on every item they're interested in. Every 60 seconds we update, we run the solver, and we show people, if the auction ended right now, what would you get? Okay? If you're not getting items you want, you can increase the bids, you increase your spending limit, you can make adjustments. On the seller side, if their items aren't selling, they can reduce the reserve price, they can reduce the starting bid, this kind of thing. So now it's dynamic, it's more cooperative, actually. And when we get down to the end of the auction, if a bid comes in the last 60 seconds, we extend the auction by 60 seconds. And we keep going until there's no bids at all for 60 seconds. Then the auction's over. Okay? Then we run the solver and we figure out what's the best way to sell these items to this crowd of people so everybody stays under budget, nobody gets more items than they wanted, and the seller makes as much money as possible. So that's one product. That's called a smart auction. We've run at least hundreds of those. We ran a lot of them on Bitcoin for Bitcoin ordinals, actually. We ran hundreds of those during the kind of ordinal bull run last year. And on Solana, we've done, let's see, what have we done? We've done whiskey, as I mentioned. We've done Magic the Gathering cards. We've done some NFTs, some art, this kind of thing. But that's one use case that I would say is good. It's just not a very big market. That's the only thing. Tokenized real-world assets are a very good use case for us. If you've got real-world assets that are in a vault, and I'm not talking about like conceptual assets like T-bills. I'm talking about real physical assets, right? That are in a vault. That's a very good use case for us. The issue is that that's still a very small market. That I think there's tons of advantages to that, and I think that will eventually win. Like tokenized real-world assets will win, but for us as a pre-seed company, we need to raise our seed round, and so we're not really focused on that because it's not going to give us the volume we need. Now, the opposite problem is one buyer, lots of sellers. Okay, and that has a very common use case in gaming, where you're going to get started playing a new game, and you need a collection of items to get started playing the game. And we have a partnership with StarAtlas right now. That's one of the biggest games on Solana. You guys probably know StarAtlas. So,
yep.
Yeah, we've had Michael Wagner come on the show before.
Oh, great. Yeah, he's great. He's awesome. So with them, what we're doing is this tool for user onboarding called Starter Pack Finder. And the idea there is now you've got the one buyer. You have all the people with stuff for sale in the secondary market. Typically, a Web3 game has a kind of closed economy. And as much as possible, they want to avoid printing new assets because that's kind of inflating their community. They'd rather it be the case that the items are moving around the economy in a circular manner. That kind of retains value for the community, right? So in this use case, what we do is we use our solver to, this is a very, it's kind of funny that the things that get traction are sometimes like 1% of what your technology can do or less,
Yeah, it's especially true in blockchain anything too.
Yeah, I mean, we will, to really do what we need, we can talk about what we need to really realize the full vision. But still, this is a real problem that a lot of games have, is onboarding new users. In fact, we're going to be doing the same thing for Genopets before too long. That's another game that has, similar problem where you need to get started, you need a bunch of things. And so their economist, I don't know if you guys, if Michael talked about Chris, they're lead economist. He's a PhD in economics. Maybe James.
Yep, we talked about it.
Yeah.
How they're structuring their economy and all things about that. It was very, very interesting conversation.
So Chris gave us a bunch of specifications for what does it take to have a kind of bronze level starter pack, silver, gold, platinum. So 4 levels of starter packs. And this can get more complex. We'll start to bring market research into this, where there'll be some short survey about what are you interested in? And based on that, we can generate a profile for that person. We can match the profile. But to start, it's just, 4 levels. And then what we do is we go to the secondary market and we scan the secondary market and we figure out what is the least expensive way to get packs that meet the conditions that are needed for each of the 4 levels. Okay. So we pull that all together, kind of aggregate. It's interesting. It's like the opposite of a smart auction. Smart auction, the stuff is going out to the crowd. Now the stuff's going in from the crowd to a single person. And we put this, these bundles together. And there, it's really, I would say, it's a very nice convenience tool because you don't have to know what you need to do. In fact, a friend of mine, when I was talking to him just a few days ago, I told him about this. He said, yeah, that's the reason I haven't been playing StarAtlas. I haven't figured out what I need. And so he did the starter pack, and now he's able to play the game. So you can get the bundles together, and then in a single transaction, you can buy what you need, and then you have the assets you need to play the game. So that's I think a gaming use case. And that will extend to a top-up tool where when you're playing the game and your assets are getting depleted, you will be able to top up it with a single transaction. And eventually what that'll turn into is you'll be able to, as we do the matchmaking, not only will you be able to top up, you'll be able to use some of the assets that you might have excess assets that you don't need anymore. And you'll simultaneously rebalance your portfolio. But your stuff then will get sold because there'll be other people doing things at similar times. And you'll have especially when people make on-chain commitments about what they need, people could just sign a transaction that says to NeoSwap, detect what I need and automatically update it. As long as you don't spend more than this amount, you have my permission to make purchases on my behalf at any point in time. And then what we can do is we can just run the solver all the time because you'll have people who have excess stuff, but not enough of other things. And other people have the opposite, or they've got, you've got all, think about all the different, if each kind of bar here is a different resource that's needed, every person's thing is kind of going up and down like this. And then we want to rebalance based on the needs of the people to move the assets around. So that's where that's headed. And I think that will find a natural home in Web3 gaming. So I'll pause there before I talk about it.
Yeah, all of that is super cool. I think every one of those products I thought was interesting in unique ways, and they're all using the same algorithm. Or I mean, obviously it has to be modified for
variations.
But it sounds like there's a
the basic idea is we have prediction models. So people talk a lot about AI. What is AI? And you've got machine learning, where learning is, for humans, is when the performance in some behavior improves with experience. That's one definition of learning. And so to a computer, experience is data. And so machine learning means that you've got a machine performing a task and its behavior improves as you feed it more data. That's a kind of reasonable definition of machine learning. Not all AI is machine learning. That when you've got these kind of routing algorithms, these are really complex mathematical problems. And you can have a range of, think about Google Maps, right? When when it's routing you, that is intelligence is the ability to accomplish a complex task, right? Or to achieve a complex goal. That's the definition of intelligence. And so artificial intelligence means the use of a machine to accomplish a complex goal. And so when Google Maps is routing you, even though it is, I'm not really sure what the current state of what's running under the hood of Google Maps, but it's probably a blend of some sort of solver and then some sort of predictions, okay? And it's largely the trade routing is going to be solvers. So our trade finding algorithm is a solver. It's like, here's the information. How do you optimize the utility gain? Like, if you think about every party involved in a trade, every one of them is going to be made better or worse off by each possible trade. And the question is, what trade, if you think of everybody involved, you want to make sure everybody benefits, and which trade is going to maximize the benefit to whoever is doing the least well? Ideally, it'll balance it. Everyone will be doing it equally well. So that's a hard problem. That's actually an NP hard problem. That's what our solver does. And then we have prediction engines. But James, go ahead.
Well, I for the sake of listeners, I don't want to get maybe too deep into the math here, and for my own sake, because I wouldn't understand it. But one question that sort of immediately comes to mind when you're talking about solving these sorts of problems, where you're trying to sort of maximize utility for everyone, is how do you know whether you're at a local or a global maxima, right? Like, how do you know that you sort of reach the actual maximum, or if you're just sort of at a point on the curve here where it's like, yeah, it looks like this is the optimal, but maybe if we had run a few more iterations of this, we would have found an even more optimal.
Right. I mean, that's the point in this case, is that it's that's why it's an NP hard problem. It's fun. Like, you're trying to find the global solution. You're not just doing gradient descent or something like that.
It's like optimal enough.
Well, this is actually
seems like it's the goal, kind of.
There's all sorts of tricks you can use to tame the problem, but for example, the smart auctions, as long as you have, if you have 100 items, 500 people, we can solve that pretty quickly. Global optimum. That's it's mathematically provable. That's a global optimum. Now, once you start to get into larger problems, then you have to start to use your heuristics. And you're right. That's an area of research that our head of research, who's a professor of computer science at Marmara University in Turkey, this is an area that he's been working on for 15 years. In fact, when I first wrote the NeoSwap algorithm, I always like to do what I'm doing first and then look around and see what other people are doing. I find that if you look at what other people are doing too early when you're trying to do something new, even in subtle ways, you end up getting biased. You end up getting influenced by the way that 100%. People are doing. It's very hard to come up with new ideas if you're always looking to see what other people are doing. You have to kind of spend some time on your own trying to solve the problem. So after I came up with my algorithm, it was actually a genetic algorithm that I was using at the very beginning. I looked at the research and I found his work. And reading his papers, I felt like I could have written them, actually. He's not using genetic algorithm. He's using another different family of algorithms. But I had found the same family and I was using them. So I felt like we were soulmates. I reached out to him and I said, his name's Alex Badar. So we have to meet. Like, we have exactly the same interests here. And when he heard that we were building a company around these ideas, he got really excited because he felt like John the Baptist, like the voice crying out in the wilderness. I don't know how you guys know the Bible, but that's like in there. So he felt like that, where, he's out there, he's trying to get people to do this thing. But when you're in academia, it's a totally different world. You're studying these problems, but it's not. That's why I left academia, because is anyone really going to listen to you? Even if you convince other professors to do something, it doesn't mean that there's going to be business. So he was really interested in working with us. And we worked out a relationship with his university where he can consult with us. We own all the IP. NeoSwap owns all the IP. And for him, it's great because now he can realize his life goal to get these ideas out into the world. So that's his whole branch of research is, at what point can you find global optima? When are you going to be finding, going to have to settle for heuristics to finish it? How good will they be? You can do comparisons where you can find the global optimum and you can use the heuristic. You can see what percentage of the optimum you end up with your heuristic. So I would say that question's been pretty well studied from an academic angle at this point. I mean, our algorithms are more advanced than what's in the literature, but that's kind of his area where we can say, yeah, this is still pretty close to a global solution. Another thing I would say is it doesn't have to be the global solution to provide value. That these just have to be trades that are good, right? And yeah, it's nice if you know that it's like mathematically the optimum trade, but as long as it's good in a smart auction, it's good to know that it is in fact optimum. But even if it's not optimum, even if you do some colossal trade and you have to settle for an approximation, this is still a lot better than what you would have gotten had you done a traditional auction. So that's the real target, is beating the alternative.
You can still be a glass half full kind of guy.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think it's like, obviously there's all sorts of people with all sorts of opinions. There's sort of a type of person that's somewhat anti-commerce, right? And I feel like maybe my internal argument that I never really say because I'm not really engaging in those debates is sort of what you just said, John. It's like, yes, there may be elements of our current economic system that aren't perfect, but there is still value being provided. We're reducing friction in ways and enabling people to do things that wouldn't otherwise be able to do it. And so, to your point, even if it isn't quote unquote the optimal solution, it sounds like it's more than just like a step in the right direction. It actually sounds like it's sort of leaps and bounds above our standard solutions.
Yeah. Well, in low liquidity environments or with assets that have big spreads, you can get commerce to happen where it's literally impossible otherwise, where no one has enough money to be able to get, like Ali Haidar has shown, you can get the same amount of commerce to happen with 10% of the liquidity using these tools. And in many cases, you can actually double the trade volume of an ecosystem by bringing these tools in. Now, these are all simulations where you have perfect information, but he's shown that theoretically, you can double the trade volume of a secondary market by using these tools. And actually, if you have low liquidity, really low liquidity, like in, for example, wine and spirit world, or I would say a lot of tokens have low liquidity. That's an interesting use case for us. When you have less common tokens, they have very illiquid. You have things that aren't moving at all. And we saw that when we launched on Stacks. There were more than, what was the number on this? It was some shocking number, like more than half of the NFT projects that had sold in our rooms over the course. So we did a 3-month kind of pilot. I can get you guys the stats after the call, but it was something like 50% of the collections that traded in our rooms didn't sell a single time on the secondary market during that time period. During 3-month period, there wasn't a single secondary market sale for these.
But then the second you got them in that room,
you got in the room. Moved. That's right, and other people are interested in them. But it's not. There's too big of a spread on the secondary market. It's not worth it to somebody to cross the spread. But if they can give up some stuff that they don't want, then they're open to it. And so we were getting a lot of commerce to happen
interesting.
where it wasn't happening at all. That's the whole idea of NeoSwap, is like new economic activity made possible by these efficiency gains.
Yeah. It's interesting.
I'm curious.
Sorry,
go ahead, James.
No, you got it, Nick.
Well, I was going to say, so I guess I'm kind of curious, like, is there a max volume? So like theoretically in these rooms, is there a max volume of quantity of people that are, or entities that are participating in these, call them swaps, in these NeoSwaps? Is there like a max quantity where it's like, it does actually become unrealistic or suboptimal at that point, with like kind of like when you're getting into that threshold when you have to start using the heuristics to actually give the best guess and you're not necessarily getting the true global maximum?
Yeah. I mean, what'll happen? Okay. So for like the smart auction, you can guarantee that everybody's going to stay under budget. They're not going to get more. I mean, the solutions will all be constrained, right? And so people will stay under budget, and they won't spend more than they wanted to. So they'll get items at prices they were willing to pay. What could happen is, if you have a very large problem, so once you get past, so this is again Ali Hader's research, what he's worked on. But once you start to get into thousands, he has a lot of tricks that can help us to keep going further and further. But once you get into thousands of items, tens of thousands of people, then you're in a situation where it could be the case that the volume to the seller is only 95% of what it would be if you had a magic machine that just knew the answer. But even still, that 95% of the total possible volume is way above what would come out of a traditional auction, where people are bidding one at a time or they're picking on just a few. In fact, in many cases, what happens in a kind of silent auction is sometimes people won't bid on any item. Some items will get no bids at all, right? And so they don't sell at all. But in our world, because it's safe to bid on everything you're interested in, you can end up with, it's safe actually to bid on every single item if you want to. You can put a lowball bid in on these various items. And so because of the freedom that comes from knowing that at the end of the day, you're not going to go over budget, people will place more bids on the items, and they'll bid more openly because they're not worried about micromanaging the outcome. So even in those situations that are extremely large, we can still give a much better outcome to the seller, and we can still have more people get things that they wanted at the end of the day. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This is very cool.
I have like
love efficiency in every way.
Yeah. I have kind of a few lines of thought here that I want to, hopefully we'll have time to go down all of them, but, you've talked about, working across a couple of different blockchains, and I'm curious if there's been differences in any way, shape, or form in the solution that you can provide based on sort of the way the blockchain is structured or the performance of the chain, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, the solver itself is chain agnostic. Now, we have had a product called AI Trades where you would connect your wallet. We would predict how much you value the items in your wallet. We would predict how much you value the items that we have access to trade, and then we would propose trades to you. And there you do need a fair amount of data to train those models. And when we found that when you have the more dense that the data are, the better those models are going to be. So, for example, on Stacks, which is relatively small, we were able to make good predictions, and the AI Trades would work out pretty well. On Solana, the data are so, the data are so sparse because it's huge, right? That you end up with, it's harder to make quality predictions. And so that's where, we kind of backed off AI Trades because it's hard to make those profitable in the early days. Okay. So another thing is that you need on-chain commitments. That's another aspect of this. The more that you can ask people what they're interested in and get on-chain commitments and have permission to do things when they're not there, that opens up the ability to do multi-way trading. So you have a whole bunch of on-chain commitments. You have a whole bunch of people, and people say, like, I'll accept trades that meet these conditions, and I'll accept trades that meet these conditions. Then you can do matchmaking. You can execute without the people being there. So in terms of convenience, I would say Solana is far ahead of Bitcoin and Stacks. And I would say that you can do on EVM chains, you have more of the capabilities that you have on Solana. Right, but Solana still has a lot of advantages when it comes to speed and low cost and that kind of thing. Plus, of course, you need an active community to make this stuff work. You need network effects. So there's a bunch of boxes that you need to check to really do this. And I would say that you want speed, low gas fees, and an active community. So for us, that's why it made Solana a very good place for us to go. We did launch on Polygon as well, and it was just hard to get traction on Polygon. Polygon's kind of more top down, I would say, whereas Solana has a very kind of organic community. So it's easier to get started for sure. And I love Solana now that we've been working on it for more than a year. Plus we went through the bear market with everybody. So we're like bonded with everybody. We all went to hell.
Committed for sure.
That trauma bonding that we all went through.
Yeah, I actually, let me just say about Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin because of its promise of durability. And there's political aspects to this too. I don't know how you guys feel about the Fed and everything. I've got The Creature from Jekyll Island here. Some reading for your listeners.
Oh, yeah. Hey, yo. I've read that book.
Yeah, that's right. I was very depressed after I read that book, actually. But, yeah. So when you understand what's going on in the world, you understand the extent to which fiat currency is actually extremely bad for the world. And, for that, I love Bitcoin because I think Bitcoin does provide an alternative to the Fed. And I think that's good. I think that would be a good thing. when that wins. But the tooling on Bitcoin is not nearly as far along. Plus, Bitcoin is kind of, it's slow. Blocks are every 10 minutes, that kind of thing. The L2s on Bitcoin are not currently nearly as performant as Solana. Stacks is still like 10-minute blocks. So it will have 5-second blocks. But, it's going to be very, very hard to beat a blockchain that was built from the beginning for high throughput like Solana. So for what we're doing, our view is we're going to build all our proof of concepts on Solana, because there we kind of have everything we need. As we start to get more and more on-chain commitments, that's another thing, because you're programming in Rust, you have very expressive contracts, or programs as they're called, on Solana. So the expressivity of Solana makes it a lot easier to do complex things. So I think that for us, our view is, I actually posted about this yesterday on, I guess it's called X now. I don't want to dead name. X. So, I posted about this next. Solana is a lot more, I would say, like Web2 startup culture. People are trying to build winning businesses, winning products, winning consumer apps. They're interested in efficiency. Of course, there's the whole degen aspect to it, and the things that come along with lighter regulation. But it's, I would say, more like traditional startup world in Solana. And Bitcoin, you have more people who are more ideologically or philosophically motivated, but they're trying to build stuff not just to affect, the economy, but to affect the political order. And so that's the difference, where you have kind of like slower and more durable, maybe more ideologically motivated over in Bitcoin. Solana, more performant. It's you've got, you have a lot of tools to work with here in Solana, low gas fees. So I kind of feel like these are two different worlds, where you've got durability here, you have performance here. And that's one of the reasons why I actually am not that, we will, after our seed round, deploy on EVM chains, and we can run on them right now. But I kind of feel like Ethereum's fighting this like two-sided war. And I just think it's going to lose in the end, because if durability matters the most, it'll go to Bitcoin. And if performance matters, if you're talking about airline miles or hotel room nights or whatever, where if the government takes away your hotel room nights, you're not like, it's not the end of the world if you lose your, coupons or whatever. You got a lot of lightweight use cases where the performance matters. And at the end of the day, the censorship resistance is less important. I think you're going to have that bifurcation. And eventually they might come together as the L2s on Bitcoin come along. But we're focused on, we're building here now. And as we learn how to develop our tools, and as the developer tooling here gets better, we will eventually come back and repeat the same thing on top of Bitcoin.
That's super interesting. I think Nick and I have slightly different feelings on Bitcoin. Nick is sort of, I don't know. Are you opposed to Bitcoin, Nick? But I'm a little more. I think John,
opposed.
Opposed. Interesting.
Yeah, opposed. Okay.
John, I'm a little bit more like you, where it's like I sort of see both use cases, right?
Yeah. Are you opposed because you think it's an NSA operation, or are you?
No. We did a full episode with Matt Lunau from Thesis and Threshold, and I expressed all these opinions with him, and he basically, it's kind of the idea of Bitcoin will always be proof of work, and eventually, I think it's largely, and I also said this during that episode with Matt, it's largely an education piece. I'm not well educated on how Bitcoin works, and that's just how my brain works. I need to understand it in order to accept it, kind of thing.
Well, you're still young.
Also,
you may not understand the state is not your friend. And, as you get older, you start to get more and more skeptical of the people who are in power and their intentions. And at some point you think we need something that nobody controls. And I think that
I can get behind that.
Yeah.
No, it's so blockchain, believe in it wholeheartedly with all of my being. Bitcoin specifically, because of proof of work and how Bitcoin rewards kind of go out, and how there's real costs for mining power to pay the electric bills and all that kind of stuff. I think it's inevitable that as rewards go away and the curve's asymptotic and all those sorts of factors all go into my ultimate thesis of I just don't believe in Bitcoin for long-term sustainability. I believe in blockchain, yes, but not Bitcoin specifically.
I would have agreed with you before ordinals. I think Bitcoin did have a long-term security problem, but I think that inscriptions on Bitcoin, I don't know how versed you are on the topic, but I think that the idea that you're going to put data itself on chain gives a sort of new use case to Bitcoin that will allow fees to continue to get paid even when the block reward goes away. And I think that would, I actually think it's funny to watch Bitcoin maxis complain all day long about inscriptions, spamming up the chain and whatnot, when that's the thing that's going to keep Bitcoin alive. That Bitcoin was generalized beyond a simple ownership ledger to be an immutable database, that it's got to be the hardest database in the world. And I think when you look at, like Alicia Keys during the Super Bowl, right? Did you guys see that? She like hit an off note when she was starting singing. I didn't actually watch the Super Bowl, but I saw a little thing about it later. She hit an off note to start her song. And then when it was on YouTube, it had been fixed. Okay. Like the official video
I didn't even know
fixed her note. Yeah, exactly. And I think that especially as we go into...
That's just a long block time is all that is.
Yeah. But especially as we go into a future where I think there's going to be this effort all the time to... Whoever's in power wants to... It's like Orwell said, right? Whoever is in controls the present, controls the past, whoever controls the past, controls the future. That's true. And I think that the ability to write data in a way that for sure it's going to last forever is going to become more and more valuable as time goes on. And so I think that inscriptions are the thing that will allow Bitcoin to continue to have value after the block reward goes away. So that would be my answer to that I don't think Bitcoin has a long-term security problem that it used to have.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, like Nick said, there's a whole lot in terms of my understanding of Bitcoin that leaves a lot to be desired. That being said, I'm just generally open to like lots of. I still kind of feel like we're in a prototyping phase almost, right? Like I know that's it's cliche to say like it's early, that sort of thing, but I do just sort of feel like. I guess I'll give a more concrete example, right? Like John, you mentioned sort of the dangers of fiat currency. There's also plenty of danger with like the gold-backed currency that we had before, where it's like, you can have changes. You can have wild inflationary periods based on just discovering a new gold mine, and some random, country or state can sort of control that, the currency at that point. So it's like I don't necessarily think that it was better before fiat currency, but also I acknowledge that there's issues with fiat currency. And Bitcoin to me is interesting because we know beforehand how it's going to play out in terms of how much inflation can there be. It's fixed, which is very interesting to me, but also that means that Bitcoin is always going to be going up in value, which also is not necessarily great for what you're spending on a day-to-day basis. It's much easier for us to conceptualize a flat thing. But also, we're
swapping problems for problems is really how I see it.
I don't necessarily think that last one is a terrible problem. I do think we can sort of like conceptualize, what's the value of this thing if it's got like an even pace and sort of increase in quote unquote value, but we're still measuring the value based on a dollar right now. And so it's hard to say like what it looks like when we're not measuring things based on that fiat currency, when we're measuring it based on, Bitcoin or some other currency. And that's sort of why I'm open to lots of things is I don't know what the solution is going to be. I don't know if it's going to be some sort of hybrid. I don't know if there's going to be some complex algorithm that tries to sort of use something like Bitcoin underneath the hood as sort of the primary driver of value, but adjusts, does some sort of secondary adjustment to it to make it a more even value over time or something. I just don't know.
Well,
and so I'm open to all those things existing.
Even if Bitcoin wins and it becomes a global reserve currency, it seems inevitable to me that as time goes on, people will forget the evils of fiat currency, and someone will get the bright idea to have it'll be Bitcoin-backed currency, okay, and then it'll be fractionalized, and then that ratio will go to zero and we'll be back to fiat eventually. That always happens. There's always this draw.
It's like the bundling and unbundling cycle that is inevitable.
Well, that's the history. People go through terrible times with fiat currency, and then they're like, "Oh, that's a terrible idea. Never again." And then as the generations that remember how bad it was die, then you have like the new generation. Hey, I have an idea. Let's print money out of nothing.
Yeah.
And so. And
that has happened for forever.
Exactly,
right?
That's right.
Even thousands of years ago, we were sort of cutting coins with lesser valuable, lower valued metals in order to sort of increase money supply and that sort of thing.
That's right. Every population rediscovers fiat currency and its wonders until they realize, oh, wait a minute, there's some downsides here too. This is where I think NeoSwap is so important, because with NeoSwap, what you're talking about are equal value for value exchanges, right? You can't print assets. If you have, or work, certificates to do work, this kind of thing, that if you have an economy that's based on an exchange of value, and money is used to fill in the value gaps, but it's not the medium of exchange all the time. If you have that economy is much more resistant to centralized power, that you can't get, even if you controlled the money that's being used to make up the value gaps. As inflation happens, the items will still they'll keep whatever value they had before the inflationary period. And so if you have this kind of fully decentralized economy where, and it has to grow in stages, we're talking about real world assets in a vault, then you're going to talk about things within apartment buildings, where people are trading locally, but they're trading things or they have certificates to do things, and there'll still be money involved. But I think as gradually these ideas find their way out into the world, and you have supply chain, you have international trade happening where assets are moving around and you just don't need as much currency. I think that's the ultimate solution. I think that I actually think Bitcoin maxis are way too focused on money, and they're not focused enough on commerce. Like money's just a means to an end.
That is a really interesting concept.
Yeah,
that is because you're right. Ultimately, what money is meant to be is a placeholder for value.
Exactly.
And what actually matters is this exchange of value. Is what do you value? What do I value? Is there a way for us to both benefit from you having something I value, I have something you value, and that to sort of the
enter
whole
NeoSwap.
Well, I was gonna say, like, to the whole thesis, it sounds like, of NeoSwap is a one-to-one exchange. It's very, money exists because one-to-one barter is virtually impossible. If you're a surgeon and I make sandwiches, it's like, well, do I give you sandwiches for free for 8 years on the off chance that one day I need a surgery and you'll do it for me, right? And it becomes much easier if we're talking exchange amongst a large group of people where you can optimize for that value exchange. And I do love the idea of saying this isn't exclusively barter either. We're bringing money into the system because we acknowledge that money is another tool to facilitate this value exchange. And it's interesting because it's almost, like you said, it's almost an acknowledgement that fiat currency isn't even necessarily like inherently bad, but it can be used for ill. But if it can fill in some gaps here and there, it actually doesn't. It maybe doesn't matter if it's fiat or not, because it doesn't ultimately control the whole system. That's right. Like, the system is resilient against it.
That's right. Resilience. That's the right word. That's what we're talking about. Is that you've got ideally, another thing is the permissionless nature of Bitcoin. I think it's another thing it has going for it. But when you have people coming together to conduct commerce, and what they care about is when the commerce is over, they're better off when it started. That right now it has to pass through money, and that gives tremendous power to a small group of people. But if it can be this network, and yes, okay, we use some money, but we could use different, currencies in different environments. It kind of federates the model, where it's not, it's not purely decentralized because you still have money, and potentially that still has some centralized control, but it's a much more federated model. And so I think it's much more robust. So I do think that NeoSwap is, or the ideas at least behind NeoSwap, and one of my goals, like what we want to do is put our tools fully on chain and essentially have it run on decentralized compute and have there just be a machine that anybody can access. If you're trying to conduct trade, you have access to use these tools, and you can conduct commerce you can do the matchmaking. This basically trade finding engine is on chain. The whole world has access to it. And now you don't, so what Bitcoin's trying to do is replace money with something that everybody has access to. Now what we want is the actual matchmaking to be something that everybody has access to. And that's something that is really important to me. Honestly, that's what motivates me more than anything. I don't actually care at all about fame. I'd rather not be famous. I think that's probably a giant hassle. You can't, Justin Bieber went to Australia to give a concert, and when he got to his hotel room, the police called him and told him if he left the hotel, he was going to be charged with disrupting the peace. So he's like a prisoner in his own hotel room, right? So and no founder is probably going to reach that level of fame. But the point is, fame can be a curse. Plus, you get mugged if everyone knows you're rich. So, like, you got to worry about kidnapping and stuff like that. So I'd rather not be famous. But I do want to be in the history books. I want to be somebody like, James Watt, where, I've written my obituary, which basically says, John Ennis brought this new type of commerce into the world. And now we all benefit. It's like has had all these material benefits. The global GDP doubled. That's the sort of thing that I want to see. And it's really interesting with AI, to what extent AI is going to solve scarcity. That's an interesting question. I was thinking about that this morning. Are we going to go into a post-scarcity world and these tools won't be needed at all? That's a very interesting topic. I don't quite see it. I feel like there always are going to be competing interests, right? There's always going to have to be some sort of settlement of competing interests. Standard of living might go up, but I feel like there's always going to be scarcity in some sense.
It's like you said, the commerce is facilitated by differences in preference, right? How we value things differently. Yeah. And even in a world of abundance, there's still sort of that difference in preference that sort of makes commerce happen. Maybe
if we're on the pod, if we're on the matrix, maybe it's infinite abundance for everybody, but
I guess we'll see. I don't see it either, but I could be wrong. Yeah. Well, hey, we only have a couple minutes left here. I want to make sure that, if there's anything you still wanted to say to our listeners, you get that opportunity. So any last minute thoughts?
Well, obviously follow us on Twitter. So NeoSwap_AI on Twitter. I'm John _Ennis_BTC on Twitter. I'm a little opinionated. I would say I used to be very much, I campaigned for Bernie Sanders. I used to really be on the left. I feel like things have gone so far that you might get offended by some of my opinions. So that's a warning. If you are, a communist, you probably won't enjoy my feed. But, follow me on Twitter. Let's see what else would I say. And try NeoSwap. Go to neoswap.xyz. You can use the starter pack for StarAtlas. You can get onboarded there. Collection Swap, which we didn't even get a chance to talk about. That's our new product. That's a matchmaking product for people who are looking to, they have NFTs. They have NFTs they'd be willing to sell at floor, okay? And they have other NFTs they'd like to buy at floor. We have a matchmaking engine coming where people will be able to express their goals. Which NFTs am I looking to sell? Which collections am I looking to get into? And we can actually provide substantial savings. That right now, if you take an NFT and you sell it into the bids and then you buy it at floor, you're crossing the spread twice. And you're losing a lot of money in doing so. But if we can matchmake you with people who have complementary interests, we can save you a lot of money. So that's going to start with kind of pairwise swaps. Oh, and we still pay royalties. That's an important point. We don't save money by not paying royalties. We save money through the matchmaking and helping people to avoid crossing the spread. So we have this system coming. And if you're interested in that, I would say just send me a DM on Twitter. My DMs are open. And we're looking for testers. And stay tuned for NeoSwap. I feel like we're on this exponential curve that we're doing lots and lots of experiments, and we're very close to taking off. So come join us for that journey.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, John. It was great to meet you. Great to learn about NeoSwap. Fascinating conversation. To the listeners, go check out NeoSwap. I will be checking it out myself. Yeah. And listeners, we'll see you all next time.
Okay, awesome. Thanks a lot, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.